Queen Amadai Shakur. So, give you another update from the closing arguments that ended today at Diddy's trial. Well, there was a lot of energy in the room. A lot of people were really enthralled and caught up in what Mark Agnifilo was saying. Now, I was given word from some of the people in the overflow that a lot of people actually stood up and cheered when the defense finished their closing argument. They said it was, very powerful. Some people actually got emotional. Okay, like some people were crying and people were clapping and everything. A lot of excitement in the room. And one of the things that I thought was interesting is that the jurors seemed to be very engaged, and I think was very strategic for the defense to have Mark Agnifilo to deliver the closing arguments because, for one, he's a native New Yorker, and the jurors are too. Okay, the jurors are New Yorkers, and I'm sure they knew that what he was going to say would resonate with them. I mean, he was funny, he was witty, he was sarcastic, he told a few jokes, and it was just very interesting. Everybody was focused on him and paying attention. Whereas, like I said yesterday with the prosecution, it kind of fell a little flat for me and for other people from what I've been hearing because it was just kind of monotone. It wasn't really theatrical or dramatic as I myself would definitely expect a closing argument to be. But I have to give it to Maureen Coleman. She did do her thing when she got up on the rebuttal today. But was it enough to convince the jurors? I mean, at the end of the day, Mark Agnifilo, he did an amazing job. Whether you like Diddy or not, I have to give credit where it's due. The defense did an excellent job, and I think it was brilliant how they strategized everything with all of these different attorneys working for his team. They all play such an intricate role, in different things, because you look at the fact that when they had Cassie on the stand, for example, they had a woman of Cassie's own ethnicity to basically talk to Cassie and do the cross-examination, which I was not surprised. I knew that they would like to have a woman to do the cross with Cassie because they don't want to look like they didn't want to look like they were bullying her. And then Agnifilo, of course, during the closing remarks or the closing arguments, and Brian Steele cross-examining a few of the other witnesses as well as Nicole Westmoreland. They all did a great job. And then you have the young Jason Driscoll, whom nobody really seems to notice because he doesn't say much. But one thing about him, I think that he specializes in litigation, and he did a very good job of pointing out the fact that the prosecution obviously didn't realize that one of the laws that they spoke on had actually been amended in December of 2023. So everybody is playing their role as far as I'm concerned. And then you have Xavier Donaldson, who also puts up a good argument, as well as Shapiro, who stood up today and let the judge know, because the judge was calling out Agnifilo. Or shall I say, Comey was actually calling out Agnifilo because she didn't like some of the things he said during the closing remarks in the beginning before we went to break. And so basically, Shapiro stood up and said, Your Honor, while you're calling out Agnifilo, you need to be talking about them because yesterday they actually misquoted the law. And the judge snapped, and the judge was like, wait a minute, that's not what happened. I didn't call him out. Comey did. So it's like everybody had the smoke, everybody was engaging, everybody was getting attitude, everybody was going back and forth. It was very interesting. It was great. It was good to watch. And I am so grateful that I was able to be here, boots on the ground, to see it all go down. So anyway, do you all think Diddy is going to get off? Do you think they're going to find him guilty? What do you all think? Because it looks like people are still torn. Many people are saying they're expecting a hung jury after that very compelling closing argument that Mr. Agnifilo gave. But let's not forget, Comey did that very good rebuttal. But I think that the defense is a little bit ahead, if I'm just being honest. And another thing is, I got it on good information that in one of the overflow rooms, Fahim Muhammad was there. Now, Fahim Muhammad is Diddy's former chief of security. Okay, the one that was also Michael Jackson's head of security, who was actually in the room when Michael Jackson passed away. He testified at the case of Dr. Conrad Murphy. So with that all being said, and Diddy's family was there, all of his kids except for the baby Love or whatever, and it was just very high energy. It was very exciting, and everybody was really thrilled at how it all went down. And again, a lot of people were very emotional. Okay, I mean, it was very compelling on both sides. I'm not going to say that the prosecution didn't do a good job yesterday because they did. I have to give props where it's due. But it wasn't as exciting and dramatic as the one that Agnifilo gave. And like I said, you could see the jury was so interested and really engaging in what he was saying. With that all being said, drop me a comment to let me know what you think. Okay, I want you all to know.
All right, I'm reporting live from the Lower East Side of Manhattan now.
Diddy trial day 32, and the defense is giving the Diddy's defense team did not come to play. They said, we are not the one or the two. Let me tell you something. They said assistants was doing what creatives do. Creatives live a certain lifestyle, and y'all need to learn and understand that. He said you ain't gonna never see Beyonce in CVS, and I have to agree with that. He said the assistant is going to CVS and buying the baby oil and the Astro Glide because that's a part of their job. He said that he said the diddler was not distributing any rugs. He was using them for personal use. $780 a week worth, sir? Okay, I digress. He then went on to say that Diddy did not force anybody to do these things. He brought it to their attention. This is my fantasy. This is what I like to do. Whoop-de-woo-woo-woo. They said, okay, let's do it. They got into it. They was texting and emailing these men. They was getting the men's birthdays, getting their names and address information so that they can book the flights. He said they were the ones on there soliciting, Cassie on Craigslist and Jane Doe over there on Cowboys and Angels. He went on to say that the prosecution has not shown arson. The prosecution has not shown bribery under the California law because the diddler never bribed an official person. Like the people at the hotel that he paid the $100,000 to, he said they're not cops. So that's not bribery. He said that he got the money from Cassie's parents, but they're not officials, even though he got the money from them. He also said that the diddler just like the swing, okay? And everybody was consenting adults. He wasn't forcing anybody to take no rugs. They was taking it because they wanted to. He said that Cassie is an addict and she was using and he was just supplying her use. He said, yes, Cassie said that this is a domestic violence situation. He went to Cassie's Instagram and showed a screenshot of the post that Cassie said. And on the post, Cassie said, this is a domestic violence case. This is a domestic violence issue. He said that she never said it was a trafficking issue. He went on to further say that Capricorn Clark loved working for the diddler. Mia loved working for the diddler. They loved their job. They were a little family. And that the diddler did nothing wrong to them. There was no forced labor at all. They also went on to say that he was paying them a good salary. Mia was getting $50,000 a year, working 100 hours a week, and not sleeping sometimes up to 3 days. He said that was an amazing salary. I'm telling you, the diddler's defense team is getting their money's worth today. But baby, let me tell you, they tried to confuse the jury a little bit and say, well, the things that happened that you saw on video in that hotel with Cassie, that's a misdemeanor. And the prosecution came back and said that is not a misdemeanor. He needs to not tell that to the jury because he's going to confuse the jury. You need to tell the jury when they come back in what the real deal is. And the judge said, yes, you were out of line for that. You crossed the line with that. That was very messy and egregious. Let's go ahead and talk to the jury. He said, let's talk to the jury at the end of my closing statement. The judge said, no, we're going to talk to the jury now.
So tell me what y'all think about this defense team. Do you feel like they came out swinging, or you feel like they hurting Diddy case worse? Diddy's defense team did not come to play. They said, we are not the one or the two. Let me tell you something. They said,
guys, there is a brand new lawsuit against Sean Diddy Combs, but he is not the only one named. His son, Justin, has also been accused in this lawsuit of luring a woman from New Orleans, Louisiana to Los Angeles under the pretense of her getting her own TV show. And once she arrived in LA, she was plied with substances, alcohol, and then Diddy and two masked men gang-hard her. Now, Justin originally reached out to her on Snapchat. They got to talking. She mentioned how she wanted to get into entertainment, and Justin got her to send him a couple of risque photos, at which point he immediately offered to fly her out to LA the next day, which of course she accepted. He was basically promising her a show or a role on Revolt TV, which was Diddy's company. There are a lot more details which I can talk about in another video, but basically what they're saying is that Justin recruited this woman for Sean Combs and these masked men to basically attack and abuse. Now, of course, Diddy's team is denying the accusation, saying that nothing like this ever happened and that we live in a world where anybody can file a lawsuit about anything, whether it's true or not. All that said, I will try to make something a little bit later to give you guys some more details on this particular lawsuit because there's a lot of stuff in it. Plus, I have some other Diddy updates to give you guys. So drop your thoughts in the comments, and of course, if you
Defense finished their closing arguments in the Diddy trial today, and Mark Agnifilo said that Cassie was a gangster for having a burner phone. He said that she lied, or was at least untruthful, about being raped by Sean P. Diddy Combs because he said she received a FaceTime from her then boyfriend, now husband, and her excuse to him was that she was raped. He also tried to say that the freak-offs were beautiful and enjoyable. He tried to name drop Michael B. Jordan, stating that Cassie had confidence to date one of the world's most innocent men. He alleged that the DRUGS mentioned in the case, well, that shouldn't even be a charge. He said it was a distraction because it doesn't rise to the level of anything except personal use. He tried to portray the freak-offs as beautiful and enjoyable. He even said that the relationship between Combs and Ventura was a great modern love story. He definitely talked about Jane, stating that she had a sexual relationship with one of the hired workers outside of the knowledge of Sean P. Diddy Combs. He talked about her desire for material possessions and nice things. The problem I seem to have with all of this is that this was a really flippant and misogynistic way to do a closing argument. Mark Agnifilo and the defense in general have already poked doubt into the eyes of the jury, or they have tried to during the trial. He could have did this closing argument completely differently. It would have been just as effective. It remains to be seen how the jury will respond to the way he did his closing argument. He even got reprimanded by the judge for bringing up the fact that the prosecution decided to remove 3 of the predicate acts underneath the conspiracy to commit RICO. Now, of course, the prosecution had the opportunity to rebut after the defense's closing argument, and they again went deeply back to the facts. Meanwhile, the defense, they asked that the jury have the courage to say that Sean P. Diddy Combs is innocent, and they should allow him to go back to his family, while the prosecution maintained that Sean P. Diddy Combs is guilty. And they literally took pretty much every instance the defense brought up and had a very good rebuttal for it. You never know what a jury is thinking. The jury will receive jury instructions on Monday, and deliberations will start after that. Defense finished their closing arguments in the Diddy trial today, and Mark Agnifilo said that Cassie was a gangster for having a
All right, I'm reporting live from the Lower East Side of Manhattan.
Diddy's team delivered their closing arguments today, and they told the jury that Cassie and the rapper were swingers. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo said that the evidence was overwhelming, that Cassie wanted to participate in freak-offs, and he said they were consensual. He said she was always free to leave Diddy, but stayed because she loved him. This is his personal life, he said. This is their lifestyle. Diddy wouldn't think in a million years there was anything wrong with that. In a bizarre moment, he called Cassie a sexy woman, and then described texts between Cassie and Diddy as, quote, some of the most beautiful language, and if the public read them, they would cry. He said, quote, if racketeering conspiracy had an opposite, it would be the relationship. Deliberations will begin on Monday, and the jury are expected to decide Diddy's fate by next.
holes poked in everything, reasonable doubt all over the place in every single witness. The government had not presented one witness that, other than like the Homeland Security agents, and even some of them got destroyed. As the government has not presented, the federal prosecutors has not presented one witness that when they got off the stand, you said, they got Puffy on that one. Not one. Every last witness that got on the stand, got cross-examined, when you got off, you said, man, nothing of what she said means anything. Nothing of what he said means anything. Every last one of them. So they go on to talk about the SEX trafficking and forced labor. And, basically in this document, the prosecution is telling the judge that although we are going to relax on the arson, the kidnapping, and the aid and abetting and the SEX trafficking, we want to still give you instructions on some of the other charges. But to me, this is a sign of weakness. This is a sign of weakness. You get all the way to the day before closing arguments, and you start peeling back and dropping charges against a man that you had on trial for 6 weeks with evidence that you knew was weak. While the government has taken seriously the court's desire for brevity, the government still strongly believes that certain limited additional instructions on SEX trafficking and forced labor instructions, which are regularly given in SEX trafficking and forced labor trials in this circuit, are necessary for the jury to adequately understand the law on these charges. Each of these instructions reflect established case law and are directly relevant to key issues in this case. Moreover, without such instructions, the government has serious concerns that the jury may misunderstand the applicable law for both charges, which are extremely complex legal concepts about which jurors.
Oh, today I get out the gap.
The defense said they wanted it, and the prosecution was clear. They said no. The government just delivered a scathing rebuttal, and they did not hold back. AUSA Comey told the jury this wasn't about jealousy, this wasn't about lifestyle, this was about power, control, and violence. She said these women said no. Mia said no. Cassie said no on her 29th birthday. Jane said no after being beaten. And the government laid it out. Combs didn't take no for an answer. He flew in sex workers, paid them thousands while he masturbated, and manipulated Cassie and Jane into participating under duress. That is not consent. That's coercion. She reminded the jury one escort said he got $500 when there was no sex, but thousands when there was. You don't pay for conversation, you pay for sex. And about the video at the Intercontinental, it's not about a phone. It's about control. Cassie was kicked. She called security, and Combs stayed because keeping control was the whole point. Now let's talk about why the prosecution says this wasn't just a messed up relationship, it was sex trafficking, plain and simple. AUSA Comey said Cassie didn't win. She got a UTI, vomit in her mouth, and urine in her mouth. That's not a win. That's lifelong trauma. She reminded the jury of Cassie overdosing in a hotel room, and Combs still forced her to do a freak off. Jane performing oral sex on Anton after being beaten by Combs. She said this wasn't just sex. There is no separating the violence and the sex. The defense claimed that this was all for the money, but AUSA Comey said Cassie already got paid. Why would she risk perjury now? Mia already settled. She had no reason to lie. And Jane, she doesn't even plan to sue. Not to mention, they all said that they either loved him or still do, so why would they do this if they loved the man? They testified because they were done being silent, and that, Comey said, is what tells you that they're telling the truth. In her final words, AUSA Comey told the jury that Sean Combs thought he was untouchable, and for decades he was. He coerced Cassie and Jane, and nothing happened. He raped Mia, nothing happened. He beat them, nothing happened. She called him Mr. Number One on the Forbes list, a man who used money and power to trap women in a cycle of abuse and then buy their silence. But now, Kid Cudi backed Cassie's story, Deontay Nash backed Jane's, and Combs is not above the law. He's not a god, she said. He stands equal before the law. Find him guilty. And that's where it ended. The jury was dismissed until Monday. Deliberations begin next week, and all eyes are on that verdict.
Thank you for tuning in to part 3 of day 32.
Now she talking too long.
trial day 30. Diddy trial day 32. Defense is giving this.
Thank you for turning back into part 2 of day.
Some of these gonna say day 32 and some gonna say day 31. But this all is today. I think some of the people just got confused in the days. Because some days he didn't have court.
Hey, my besties. Welcome to day 32.
Why is they talking so low?
Diddy trial day 30. Diddy trial day 30. Diddy trial day 30.
Okay, here we are, Matthew Russell Lee, Inner City Press, here at the Southern District of New York Courthouse today, Thursday, June 27th. It's day 32 of the U.S. versus Sean Combs trial. Today, the defense closings. We're on our way in. Yesterday, the prosecution's closing by AUSA Slavic brought together a lot of threads, I will say. It's not so much the law when actually described in that context, not just on the dry piece of paper of a jury charge, but actually described orally to a jury, made it seem pretty easy to convict him. Because it said, and I'm saying this just like, it changed my view in the sense that they don't have, there's a lot of things they don't have to find. On the transportation for prostitution or commercial sex work charge, they don't really have to show intent or anything. It seems very tricky. And on the RICO, they just have to find 2 incidents, and they can even be the same predicate. Those who thought that the U.S. letter dropping theories of liability concerning arson and kidnapping and aiding and abetting sex trafficking would result in a substantially different closing, we're incorrect. We're incorrect because it was all there. There was multiple references to Kid Cudi. There were multiple references to Capricorn Clark. So I think it would have been better to have, we've got a lot of noise pollution here, but so be it. I think it would have been better for the defense. Okay, we've got a garbage truck. We've got some trees being cut down, so apologies all around. In fact, what? Okay, well, sorry for the noise pollution. This courthouse.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Okay, I got your update number 32 for the 32nd day of the Diddy trial, which was yesterday, Thursday. Today is Friday. We're still one day behind. So yesterday, all day long, until the very end, was the prosecution's closing argument. I'm just gonna, there's no way I could write down everything. I just wrote down stuff that I thought was like sort of like their hard-hitting points maybe, and anything hip-hop related.
U.S. versus Sean Combs date. United States versus Sean Combs, day 31. I am on a train right now, so I apologize. And also, I will be missing the second half of the closing argument by the defense today, but I will update everybody with the transcript and anything else later, because I don't know if the schedule is going to go exactly according to plan. They have Mark Agnifilo, of course, finishing the defense closing arguments, and then Maureen Comey's rebuttal, or I believe it's Maureen Comey, but the government will be doing a rebuttal. Sorry, it's a little quiet. And then the judge is supposed to issue the jury charges, and he even mentioned possibly deliberations, but I don't think that that's going to happen. I feel like even the jury charges might be pushed to Monday. I mean, sometimes they're worried about losing a juror. but we'll see what happens. I will update everybody on X or on YouTube under the post with what the schedule is going to be. But okay, let's get to Mark's closing argument. Now, he is much different than Christy Slavic. He speaks very freely to the jurors. He speaks like, you know, they're friends. And he thanked them. He thanked them profusely for their work, for how diligent they were. And then his big kind of first punchy moment here was, this trial is the tale of two trials, told by the mouths of the witnesses. One trial, the witnesses, the text messages, the videos, and the evidence. And then the other trial is told by the mouths of the prosecutors. And that's a much different trial. Sorry, if I'm talking quietly, it's because I'm trying not to disturb everybody, which I'm doing anyway, but whatever. And then he said this case is badly exaggerated. You know, the government has the most complicated charge and the most serious charge of racketeering based on personal drug use and threesomes. So he said basically every hotel night, you know, that Sean Combs rented with his girlfriend is a federal crime scene. And then he talked about how many people were moved by Sean Combs and how many witnesses got on the stand and testified that they loved him and that they learned so much from him business-wise, and how, you know, Mia was suicidal, or talked about being suicidal when she thought she was going to get fired. And then he brought up Derek Ferguson, the CFO, who was very impressive with his you know, business degree from Harvard, UPenn, Stuyvesant for high school. And he said, you know, a man like that learned from Sean Combs. So, you know, this is not a criminal enterprise. This is legitimate businesses here. And, you know, he also said, like, Sean Combs was doing DEI in 1993 when no one told him to. So, again, the government saying this is a racketeering enterprise, like all of his businesses. And he said the words, "Are you kidding me?" And then he talked about the search warrants that HSI executed on his homes, and he was like very sarcastic. He was like, you know, all those boxes of Astroglide, all that baby oil, thank God that was taken off the streets. You know, the streets are much safer now. Way to go, HSI. You got 5 Valium pills. Way to go. And then, you know, he kind of said, because that's what the government has. They don't have racketeering. They have got baby oil. So, oh, and he also said, you know, I want to talk about Sean Combs' character. You have Jane sitting pretty on a house that he pays for. And then Agnifilo said, is that coercion? So, oh, he pointed to Diddy's children. He said, you know, 6 of Sean Combs' 7 children are sitting right here today. Because again, that's the kind of man he is. He loves his children. The only child that's not here is his baby daughter. So, oh, he also mentioned that the word love was spoken 881 times on the stand. And he talked about, you know, Cassie, and how he said, we are owning the domestic violence with Cassie. That is not being disputed here. However, you know, you should listen to Cassie's own words, because after the CNN video was released, she made an Instagram post that said, thank you for the support. Domestic violence is the issue. And he was like, you know, she could have said forced sex is the issue, or running away from freak-offs is the issue. But no, she said domestic violence. So he said, believe Cassie, believe her, listen to what she says. He said that a few times. And he said, let's be real, it's so awful, it's so horrible, but, you know, the government was not invited in, and they don't know what happened. She was there, and he also, you know, he said that this case is because of money and Cassie's lawsuit, and that she wouldn't have sued for $30 million if he didn't have it, and that the federal investigation stemmed from her lawsuit directly. And just jumping around a little bit, just going to the witness tampering and the obstruction, he actually said when it came to Jane that those audio messages from Sean Combs didn't sound great. However, he wasn't worried about a federal investigation. He was worried about another major civil lawsuit from someone like Jane. And so, yeah, that's really what it was. And he said, no, he was not trying to obstruct a federal lawsuit. And then I'll just finish off the obstruction aspect really quick, because he talked about how Mia, you know, it wasn't witness tampering or obstruction when D-Rock offered her money, because the government never showed us the text messages where Mia said she was running low on Skrilla, and D-Rock just said, oh, do you need money? So, because he did go a little bit out of order, by the way, with some of the RICO predicates, but yeah, but I just covered obstruction, witness tampering. So just back to Cassie really quickly. He also talked about how Cassie was, quote, nobody's fool. He said that Diddy really met his match with Cassie as well, in terms of like the fact that she had a burner phone to date Kid Cudi, and that Kid Cudi testified that he felt like he was played and that Diddy was played too by Cassie. Cassie testified that she got another hotel room for her burner phone alone. And he's like, why would she do that? Because she knew what she was doing. And then he said, you know, Cassie, if you're looking at Sean Combs and Cassie here, Cassie's the real winner because she's sitting on $30 million and Sean Combs is sitting in federal jail. He also he said Cassie is keeping it gangsta when she was having this relationship with Kid Cudi, and that she really would have kept it going had Sean Combs not discovered what happened. And he also encouraged the jury to read their text messages, their breakup text messages, because it would make them cry. And, you know, he said, yeah, that Cassie left because she heard Sean Combs say that Kim Porter was the love of his life at her funeral service, because Cassie went to her funeral service, and then she made the adult choice to leave then and there. And then he said, and what happened to her after she left? Nothing. Same with all of the other witnesses who testified they were too scared to leave his companies. They left, and what happened? Nothing. And then, yes, okay, so the RICO acts, he discussed kidnapping, Capricorn Clark, and he went hard on Capricorn Clark. So I already discussed when he kind of asked the jury, like, why was he charged? But basically, he said, yeah, Capricorn Clark got door-to-door service when she was kidnapped over this polygraph test. That doesn't make sense. You know, he drove her home. And also Sean Combs' name never came up. He was on Broadway. He was running businesses. He was doing vote or die during this time. He wasn't checking in on Capricorn Clark. He just didn't know what was going on. He didn't care. This is what, again, Agnifilo was saying. He also said that, yeah, during the Capricorn Clark kidnapping testimony with Kid Cudi's house, it just didn't make sense because Capricorn had a crush on Diddy, and he wouldn't need a gun to come to her house and ask her to do anything or go anywhere with him, so that didn't make sense. And again, she never told anyone about this gun. And he also said she exaggerated the car chase, that Kid Cudi and the police officer never mentioned this. And he said, you know, Capricorn Clark is a little off. She's a very nice woman, but she's a little off. No one else talked about, you know, their parents dying on the stand, although that's very tragic. And so then he kind of said, this doesn't meet the New York or California laws for kidnapping. You have to be held by force. And she wasn't. And then he talked about Cassie and her kidnapping as well, and the fact that, you know, she had stated in her testimony that she wanted to recover at Sean Combs' house. And he's like, why would she want to recover at her kidnapper's house? That doesn't make sense. And she never testified that she was there by force. And then, he also, you know, he kind of went a little bit out of order, but when he talked about Capricorn Clark being kidnapped and the whole Kid Cudi thing, he brought up the Porsche. And he brought up the fact that, you know, he basically said, you're going to charge him with arson when the police did a horrible investigation here. They didn't look into the female DNA. They never looked further. They, you know, and you had Capricorn Clark's brother, after this investigator called him, he was trying to obstruct. He was trying to say, you know, you can't talk to her, whatever. So he basically said the police did a horrible investigation and they purposely never showed the picture of Kid Cudi's single glove in the backseat. And so the jury shouldn't take any of this as fact. And then he said that the bribery didn't meet the proper statutes to be considered, you know, an actual bribe charge, because a conspirator has to promise a bribe to a person who is about to be revealed as a witness or go to law enforcement, and the Intercontinental incident did not involve law enforcement at all. And he said, again, this was more of a reputational thing over, you know, I'm going to get arrested thing, because nobody wanted this to go to law enforcement. And again, he talked about also that I think I brought this up, the Cassie beating at the Intercontinental Hotel, you know, it's just incorrect. This wasn't a kidnapping. This was, you know, this is obviously unfortunate domestic violence, but it's a misdemeanor, which is not entirely correct. His point was this shouldn't be a federal crime. And he kept calling it a fake trial. And he had some of the jurors laughing, by the way. The male jurors were definitely engaged and laughing. And then he talked about Mia and the forced labor charge, and he said that that it wasn't it wasn't accurate that he sexually assaulted Mia, because when he was kind of threatening Mia about calling him back in South Africa, he said, I'm going to tell Cassie about us. And Agnifilo said, kind of like, use your brain. If he assaulted her, why would he dangle that in front of her and say, I'm going to tell Cassie? Well, because it was consensual. And then he showed an image of one of Mia's Instagram posts where she had like the whole bad boy family and some of Diddy's actually family members, and they're all posing together. They all look happy. There's like 20 people. And again, this was Mia's Instagram, and he's like, there's your racketeering enterprise, folks, which kind of elicited some laughter. So far, I'm gathering that he's really just trying to make a mockery and a farce out of the government's whole case here, and that's what he's going for. I mean, I'm sure he's going to tie it all together by the end. I'll have to get some information, from obviously the transcripts and some other reports. But yeah, so I think that's all going to depend, the effectiveness of this is going to depend on how the jury takes it. So, all right, guys, sorry I couldn't be there for the whole day. All right, and something that I forgot to add here is that Maureen Comey, during a break, she had some objections, and this was pertaining to some things that Mark Agnifilo said. So he asked the jury when it came to Capricorn Clark's kidnapping, he kind of said, why would prosecutors charge him with kidnapping? This clearly wasn't a kidnapping. And Maureen Comey made 2 points. She said, number one, we didn't charge him with a kidnapping. We charged him with racketeering. This is just a predicate act. And then she said, additionally, the jury is required to follow instructions, not speculate about the nature of the charges, which is what Agnifilo was doing. And then she added her third objection, which was when she said that Agnifilo misstated the law and that Cassie's domestic assault wasn't a misdemeanor. It could have been an aggravated assault, which is not a misdemeanor. But Agnifilo said, I was just trying to say that this was not a federal charge. This should have been a state thing. So the judge sustained and said he was going to.
Diddy twin daughters walked out of the court today in tears. They were there for the closing arguments from the prosecution, and they were able to see everything that their father is being charged for, every piece of evidence that they have against him, dates, times, locations, all of those things were laid out in the PowerPoint presentation. And when they walked out of court today, they were crying. They probably know that their father is going to prison for a long time. I'm sure they feel defeated, they feel sad, they feel hurt, and they probably feel embarrassed. If that was my father, I would not be at the courthouse. I wouldn't have shown up not one day because of the things that he has been accused of. And I'm sure there's something that they have had to have witnessed in the house, his temper, him talking on the phone, him being rude to Jane or something. Because you got to remember, when Cassie's lawsuit came out, Diddy and Jane kept doing the FOs. They would just do it at his house or their house together. I feel really bad for the twins. To see that your father is this type of person is honestly heartbreaking. Diddy twin daughters walked out of the court today.
If that was my father, I would have been in the courthouse with him every step of the way.
Diddy trial day 32.
Today was the last day of the Diddy trial, and Mark Agnifilo delivered the defense's closing argument. He had a very different tone than the prosecution, mocking and even flippant. He said the government raids just resulted in personal drugs and lube being taken off the streets. And he said this case is about money because Cassie called a lawyer and sued Diddy before she called the police. He admitted the domestic violence because he had to. We've all seen the hotel surveillance video. But he called it a modern love story because Cassie left the relationship on her own and is $30 million richer. He reminded reminded the jury that Cassie was playing both Diddy and Kid Cudi, and that she had a burner phone to lie to them both. He attacked Capricorn Clark by saying she had a crush on Diddy, and that's why she lied about being kidnapped. He said Diddy did not set fire to Kid Cudi's car, which would be arson, because Diddy wanted to fight him, and that would be the coward's way out. He argued that Diddy paid hotel security guards for the video to avoid bad publicity, not because he wanted to bribe law enforcement, and that he didn't try to tamper with witness Mia. He just offered to help her. I don't buy any of this. Agnifilo said the prosecution was targeting Diddy. That's improper argument. You can't talk about the prosecutor's motivation, and the judge admonished him and told the jurors to disregard it. On the sex trafficking, he argued that the sex with Mia was consensual. Why else would she post positive things about him on social media? On the drugs, he argued that Diddy didn't distribute them, which was a weak argument in my opinion, because there's plenty of evidence that Diddy gave the woman drugs. As expected, he argued consent and said that this was all part of a swinger's lifestyle. He read the text messages, which were very good for the defense, and said the videos show Cassie wanted the freak-offs, and there was no way for Diddy to know this was not consensual. He tried to blame the 2016 hotel incident on Diddy being high on drugs, and said that it was just an argument about his cell phone. That was not effective in my opinion. He argued that Jane wanted nice things, and that's why she agreed to the hotel nights. Like I've been saying, that it was all transactional. They agreed to it at the time, but they regret it now. That's not rape. On prostitution, which is the strongest charge, he tried to argue that Diddy just thought he was hiring a porn star, not a prostitute, and that it was all homemade porn. That was a pretty weak argument, and they lost credibility with the jury. In racketeering, he asked why KK and D-Rock weren't charged, which I agree with. That was a big mistake by the prosecution. On rebuttal, Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey said the defense is just trying to blame the victims, and that Diddy knew he was breaking the law by flying out escorts. That's why I asked if they were a cop, and he paid them cash. And of course Diddy blew up Kid Cudi's car. He said he was going to do it, and it blew up. Diddy knew it was bribery because he told hotel security not to make any big purchases with the money. And she argued the victims did not consent to being covered in baby oil, urinated on, having sex for hours with multiple strangers while they were on their period or had UTIs. It was very powerful. And the victims have already settled their lawsuits and been paid, so they had no reason to lie. And importantly, you can't separate the physical violence from the sex trafficking. The jury starts deliberating on Monday. Today was the
So defense in the Diddy trial came out swinging this morning. When Mark Agnifilo addressed the jury, he said there were two versions of this trial. One that was told by witnesses, video and text, and another that was told by the prosecution. And he told that the prosecutor's version was exaggerated and not the real trial. Now, Mark Agnifilo leaned hard into the Cassie Ventura claims. And get this, he literally said, we owned the domestic violence, but then followed up by saying that their relationship was a modern love story. And he also said that this isn't about crime, that it's about money. He said that Cassie sued Diddy for $30 million for the sole reason that he has $30 million. And regarding the alleged kidnapping of Capricorn Clark, he said that it wasn't kidnapping, just a lie detector test, and Diddy wasn't involved because he was too busy working. And I'm just going to say, a lie detector test that lasted 5 days in a warehouse she didn't want to be at and was threatened to be thrown into the East River. He then brought up the arson of Kid Cudi's Porsche, saying that Diddy had absolutely nothing to do with it, that the investigation was sloppy, and the DNA found was female. And when it came to the hotel incident with Cassie, he said that the payment to the security guard wasn't a bribe, that it was just an effort to avoid bad press because the cops were never actually involved. Now, the defense strategy here is obviously very bold, and we have a lot more coming, so of course make sure to hit that follow button and drop your thoughts about what they're doing so far. And I will also do another video shortly talking about the way the prosecution handled everything yesterday and giving you all a breakdown on how strong I believe their argument was, because it was the best that we have seen from prosecution, in my opinion. Today, the prosecution laid it all out in regard to Diddy's trafficking and racketeering trial. And they didn't just recap, they laid it all out. Decades of violence, manipulation, substances, and exploitation. Prosecution told the jurors that this wasn't chaos, that this was organized crime. It wasn't about isolated incidents, it was about control, power, and patterns. Jurors were told that from the 2016 assault of Cassie Ventura to the 2024 attack on Jane, that they weren't separate stories, they were all chapters in the same book, a book that was written by Sean Diddy Combs. Prosecution described an enterprise made up of bodyguards, assistants, and staff, and the sole purpose of that mission was to serve the defendant, Sean Combs' every desire through violence, coercion, and manipulation. They talked about how his assistants made $100,000 a year, whereas his chief of staff made $600, and that obedience wasn't optional, that it was bought. They talked about how Diddy used silence and shame to hide the truth, using threats, substances, violence, and even making S-tapes in order to control women like Cassie and Jane. She played recordings, showed texts, emails, and even showed a slide of 27 different men allegedly trafficked to them. And when Jane tried to resist, he told her, "You better get on your job," after then beating her, shoving substances down her throat, and texting an escort. He then asked her, "Is this coercion?" "Yeah, it's exactly what it is." And to close, so defense in the Diddy trial came out swinging this morning. So defense in the Diddy trial came out swinging.
It look like it's about it. Let me see if they got some more. Look like that's about it for today.
It is Friday with the defense's closing arguments, and this is the recap after the lunch break. The judge said that he would rather do jury instructions on Monday and then have them deliberate. Therefore, today, once the defense is finished, they're going to wrap up for the day. Defense says that Sean made homemade corn and that it's really not a big deal. That the defendant regularly shot footage of his girlfriends having sex with male escorts as he watched and shot the footage. He's not the only man in America making homemade corn. The attorney insisted that Sean would never use the footage as blackmail, but he did. Agnifilo portrayed Sean's Smex marathons and rug-fueled hotel nights as pleasant experiences in beautiful hotel rooms. He said there's no way on earth that Sean was ever going to release videos of sexual encounters. Looking at the videos, you heard from Jane. There's a rapport. Everyone's smiling. It's a Smex party. They're eating food. Cassie's eating watermelon. They're listening to music. The two male escorts that testified said there's a lot of talking and hanging out. There's a nice quality to these evenings. His attorney can't be serious. His attorney brought up January 2024, where Sean and Jane were in Vegas having sex with Anton, a corn star, and that Jane had reached out to him for the freak off. She says, "I showed my friends. It sounds like spring break." Agnifilo insinuated Jane and Anton had a sexual relationship outside of the freak offs with Sean. He said there were holes in her testimony and said that on occasions when she got violent with Sean, it was likely because she wasn't getting what she wanted and needed from a financial standpoint. His defense says that hiring men from escort services shouldn't be viewed as a sexual act. His attorney said, "No one ever said, 'Hi, I'm a male prostitute.' There's no evidence of that." He said that when Sean asked the escort agency for a discount based on his previous hires, even the company pointed out he's paying for time. His attorney sounds crazy. His attorney said that evidence of firearm possession was introduced to do nothing more than to smear Sean. Brought out a big, nasty, scary gun to scare you. For what purpose? To make you think he's a bad person. He said the government should have had a better accounting for which weapons were found if this were an important element of the case. That can't possibly be true. Was that them doing their best? That can be reflected on how much you trust them. Agnifilo is wrapping up his presentation, imploring jurors to set his client free. You should feel the courage to call it as you see it. I'm asking you to summon the courage and to do the right thing. I'm asking you to acquit Sean Combs of all counts. He's not a racketeer. He sits there innocent. So return him to his family who has been waiting for him. I'm going to say, based on that closing argument, it's not looking too good for Mr. Combs. Next up is the Assistant U.S. Attorney for rebuttal. The judge tells the jury not to be concerned about who the prosecution has not charged in this case. During the defense's closing, Agnifilo questioned why other people weren't targeted for prosecution and just Sean. Judge said arguing that Sean is the target of a selective prosecution was not appropriate. Prosecution's back up for rebuttal and says the defense offered nothing more than lies and excuse after excuse for Sean's inexcusable behavior. Make no mistake, this trial was how, in Sean Combs' world, no was never an option. He didn't take no for an answer from employees and certainly not from his girlfriends. Prosecution laughed at the defense, arguing that Sean's frequent hire of male escorts was for their time and not related to Smex's work. Common sense tells you he did not pay them for their scintillating conversation. It was for Smex. Prosecution said that Capricorn Clark was kidnapped to go to Kid Cudi's house and that it's laughable to believe the defense's assertions that she was there willingly to help with a break-in. Prosecution said he ran a criminal enterprise with help from plenty of employees. This is a guy who can't get his own water bottle or plug in his own phone charger. He is the general and not a foot soldier or lieutenant. Prosecution said 2 former girlfriends and a former assistant said they were SA'd by Sean despite the defense's assertion that Smex was consensual. All 3 women made it clear that they did not want to submit to acts pushed onto them by Sean. These 3 women have no reason to lie. These freak-offs and hotel nights were allegedly the brainchild of one person. Sean's desire for these nights was predictable and insatiable. Prosecutors said women felt like they had no choice but to give in. He coerced Cassie and Jane into this and nothing happened. He raped Nia and nothing happened. He beat Cassie and nothing happened. He beat Cassie in a hotel on tape, then bribed the guards to buy it and nothing happened. He was untouchable. He did not think these women would speak and that Kid Cudi and Deontay Nash and other men would back them up. The defendant is not God. He stands equal before the law. Find him guilty. Court is adjourned, and Monday morning the jury will get their instructions and then begin to deliver.
Sean Diddy Combs case update. Let's get into it. Yesterday, the prosecution came out swinging. I heard they did an excellent job in their closing arguments, which is to be expected. However, today is the day for the defense to hit a home run. Now, do you guys think the defense is going to hit a home run for Diddy? I do.
The defense admitted that Diddy is guilty of DV, but not much else. I'm an attorney and I'm following the Diddy trial, so you don't have to. The defense began its closing argument by accusing prosecutors of putting Diddy on trial for his lifestyles and not any real crimes, and for baselessly charging Diddy with RICO, which according to the defense is one of the most complicated and comprehensive statutes on the books. The defense called Diddy a highly successful businessman, a self-made, successful Black entrepreneur. The defense then emphasized the devotion of Diddy's employees, who were grateful for him even if his behavior was violent or irrational at times. The defense stated that though they may not have always liked Diddy, they loved him, even the ones who are suing him. The defense conceded that Diddy is guilty, just not guilty of the charges against him. They stated that yes, Diddy is guilty of DV, but not racketeering or schmex trafficking. They also stated that Diddy denied throwing a Molotov cocktail in Kid Cudi's Porsche and that there's no evidence proving otherwise. The defense argued that Diddy never distributed drugs as part of a criminal enterprise, but instead had them for his own personal use. The defense also called the schmex trafficking charges the lowest hanging fruit, stating that the evidence shows Cassie wanted to participate in free goss. The defense said, quote, "This is his girlfriend. There is no suggestion that he is making money from this. This is his personal life. They were swingers. This is their lifestyle." The defense's closing argument is still going, so hit follow for all the updates.
Thank y'all for watching. Hit the like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments what y'all want me to talk about after this Diddy trial is over. Thank y'all for watching.
Today I get out the gas